Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you all today? Tonight, we're going to try to take out a few more objectives as far as Palworld goes. So far, we have successfully managed to get quite a bit going in terms of laying down our base. We need to build a farm, which is what we're going to do right here. Well, once we finish gathering the appropriate resources. So, goals for this particular episode. Try to go through, get the base actually upgraded to the point where it feels like a real base. And then start trying to capture some pals and put together some basic armor and weapons. In other words, try to actually get a really decent start in this one. Now, all that being said, that's not too much stuff to ask. The problem is, I tend to get really distracted when it comes to base building. That is probably the main thing that draws attention away from me actually successfully making progress towards completing the game. Like, say for example, what really should probably be a high priority at the moment, rather than base building, is going out and actually capturing a whole bunch of the basic pals, like trying to get up to 12 of each of the ones in the starting area, to really boost my level up. Because in reality, to start hitting the check marks that we need to do the what I consider mid-game, then we really need about level 19 minimum, because that will enable us to actually get a flyer and actually mount it, go around and build our breeding facilities and have a high enough level to kill a couple bosses so that we can get the hidden ancient technology points, or whatever they're called, to unlock the incubators and get our farm going, as well as potentially be high enough level that we can craft up some decent spheres and go get a bee guard and a couple other key pals that we need in order to actually get our Anubises going, which will significantly increase the efficiency of our base. Like, seriously, it's hard to overstate exactly how useful breeding is in this game. Breeding can pretty single-handedly take you from having basically nothing to actually having really, really high quality gains. Of course, one of the problems you find in the early game is just really basic resources like palladium fragments, ore, and stone are a bit of a pain in the rear to get. So one nice thing about this location for a base is, now granted, it'd be a lot easier if I'd already built the glider, but you can hop down from the cliffs up above and run up and down this little coast, well, not coast, but creek, and there's plenty of palladium deposits, and they regenerate relatively quickly. So it's really not that hard to get a bunch of palladium fragments. Now, granted, I'm whacking on this rock like an idiot with a damaged weapon, and so it'll take forever to get anything out of it, but I'm pretty sure at this moment I'm just kind of trying to grab something, just so I can take things back with me. That way it doesn't continue to be a complete waste of time. Now, one thing that is a little bit simpler to do rather than go back up and try to slip past the boss while you're early game and really don't have a whole lot is climb up to this spot, come around to this cliffside, and you can just hop up a couple short climbs and actually be back up to where the base is, which I guess realistically I could have probably done that at the beginning of the game without going past the boss as well, because this is also semi-close to the route that you take to get to Rain Tower, I think. I could be wrong on that particular point, but I'm not sure. This is not a terrible place to get to for a starting base, and it gives you tons of ore in a really close, accessible location. So it's not that bad to do to gain yourself a good starting place. And as you actually gain the ability to put up some ore farms in the base, you can actually start building flat on the bottom. Alright, so jumping ahead, we repaired and teleported back to the plateau beginnings, to the first little part. One of the ideas being gain some basic resources that are out here and also start capturing some of the pals to try to push our level up a little bit. We needed some stones to actually make pal spheres, but you know, while we're out here, we'll grab a couple things as we can. So having that teleport back to the plateau of beginnings does pop you out right in a spot where there are stone deposits really close by. And from what I've seen, if that's the place where I've set up my base is where you want to start your starting base, you're going to need to come back here to get stone, at least up until the point where you can actually set up a quarry. You'll also need to do one thing that I put off for an incredible amount of time, which is waiting till nighttime and just wandering around until you can find yourself a tombat to catch, because they're pretty good early game. They stay up all night and they'll do some mining for you, and so they'll build you up with a decent supply of stone. Now, why do you want a whole bunch of regular stone? To make pal spheres. Now, there's another cheap way to do it, and it's to grab the pal that is an electric one that looks like the fox that I can't think of its name offhand right now. But grab that one, throw it into a farm, and it'll actually drop pal spheres for you, the basic ones. So there's another lamball for us. At this point, of all the ones that we need to capture, we have lamball, because we need one of them. And we have, not sure what else, and we have a death. Yeah. That shit gets old. The dropping everything on death. I hate that so much. Should I go through and put the fatality fragment in or add a death counter in the corners? That might be entertaining, but then I have to maintain the death counter from episode to episode. Whatever you guys want. If you're interested in me throwing a death counter in the episodes, let me know. If I actually get hell, to be honest with you, if I get one comment saying they want to see the death counter, I'll put them in. Not that many people interact with the channel, so you gotta pander to the few people that I have, right? By the way, plug in the channel for just a moment. Get up to 50 subs. Actually might start doing at least a once monthly live stream. Tried setting up a video just a little bit ago to do Hades 2, and somehow screwed up and didn't record my audio. No, okay, I say somehow screwed up. I know exactly how I screwed up. I decided to play using a PlayStation controller, and I forgot that it has a microphone built into it. So even though I switched the audio back to coming out of my audio setup, I forgot to switch the audio for the recordings to go back to my audio setup. So that's my fault. All right, so right here, trying to decide, go ahead and make the shield or gather just a little bit more resources so that I can do both the shield and something else that I want to construct, which is the farm or the ranch. And I decided to go ahead and drop the ranch first so that I can actually have some lamballs building cloth so that I can also work towards building the armor. Realistically, grabbing the shield would have probably staved off some headache that would pop up a little bit later, but I don't know. And realistically, when you're choosing which way to split your resources, it doesn't really matter which way you go, as long as you're not concerned with being the absolute most time efficient possible, which it would be hard to imagine that I'm actually all that concerned about time efficiency, as you all will start to see each time one of these episodes progresses. I don't really understand why I didn't just go grab one of the Kativas and carry it over, because even though it shows them helping there, unless they're actually standing with you and helping build it, and now granted, they could be half of a mile away and actually helping from the other side of the screen, but usually you see the time drop significantly when they actually start helping. So I was counting for them, which is fine. It helps boost their experience, and all these little things give experience to your pals, so every little thing like that helps, but I don't know. I stood around long enough to nearly starve myself to death, so I think the only reason why I didn't starve to death is because I'm in my base. But, yeah, look at how I dropped my health down. Raw meat, by the way, doesn't hurt you. It's better if you cook it, because a lot of the cooking stuff gives you bonuses, but it's not absolutely necessary to cook in this game. Cooking is useful. It gives you all sorts of buffs, and it will help boost everything as far as like work efficiency or damage, any of that type of stuff, but it's not really a 100% needed must do this all the time type of thing. If you're just trying to stave off hunger, just pop some berries or something and don't really worry too much about like min-maxing food bonuses unless you're actually at a part of the game where you really need to be min-maxing food bonuses. Which the only thing I can think of for that is if you're really trying to boost your working efficiency for one reason or another, which I'm sure since we're on hardcore mode, or not hardcore, but hard, we'll actually try to boost efficiency at some point. Speaking of hardcore though, I've actually thought about popping this up on the PC and trying to stream some attempts at hardcore mode. I don't know, there's a couple things I have in mind that might be fun to stream, but I don't really even know what day of the week I would do it consistently. Because you can't just stream for a half hour and call it quits. That's one of those things where you got to go for a little while in order to actually make it useful. But I don't know, I think I'd rather wait until I get 50 subs on here and then just multi-stream. That way, at the very least, it helps boost my main thing, which is the YouTube channel. At least that's the way I look at it. So now, working our way towards actually building the armor, which is why we got the cloth, which is why we actually built the farm first and put the land walls over there, so that we could get cloth to do this with. And now we get to stop being naked. This is one of those times where I really miss the Anubises, because they make any sort of crafting just end in the blink of an eye. We're not terribly far off from there, just a couple hours worth of work, and it's really only a couple hours because I just get obsessively focused in on expanding the base at certain points. So picking up a fox spark harness so that I can actually complete that quest when it pops up, and otherwise grabbing my logging and stone pit to start getting a little bit more efficiency in terms of resource generation. So there's a whole lot of the really important tech that unlocks within about the first 20 levels that really just goes towards making the game efficient and a little bit easier to manage. Armor upgrades, probably won't worry too much about them until I actually get to the second tier of armor, like getting the heat resistant and cold resistant ones, because they're mainly going to be useful for map exploration, gaining some extra technology points, that type of stuff. We're dropping the Statue of Power, not so much because I absolutely need it just yet, but to meet the requirements to upgrade the base. Now granted, it's not terrible to have. This is definitely not a waste of resources, because at the very least you can go out hunt down life monk effigies and boost your capture power, which once I gain a decently speedy mount, we'll do that. I think probably after we get a Van Worm. Yeah, the first guy is going to be a Nighthawk, which any flying mount is a good mount, but Nighthawk barely moves faster than ground mounts. And that's realistically only because you can go in straight lines rather than having to run around objects. So it's doable. It's useful for getting you into some kind of early game locations, but it's not a mount you want to stick with any sort of longevity in mind. So, also, one upgrade that'll be worthwhile to grab as soon as I can get it is the metal chests. These wooden ones just barely hold anything, and you end up having to build a metric ton of them to actually keep your stuff emptied out, which, yet again, reminder, you want to keep everything emptied out of your pouches as much as possible while you're playing in a mode where you're actually going to die, because it's a pain in the ass to go back and hunt them down again. So let's talk about base construction a little bit, because I'm getting ready to start trying to expand out on the base. What my goal is really to lay enough foundations and lay them around in just the right pattern to where I can actually connect them together throughout my entire base. So where that tree is, I want it gone. I want to be able to go all the way around the perimeter, because I'm not terribly worried about degradation outside the base. It's not really that big a deal. Even with it turned on, it's really, really slow. And as long as your main structures aren't completely settled on something sitting on the outside line, even if one of them kind of degrades and falls apart, you'll be okay. You just kind of want to be sure everything is interconnected. So whatever the perimeter is for your base, you want it to go all the way around. So I want something from my house up on top of those rocks to actually connect down to that ring that I just built around the perimeter. And at the moment, I'm not 100% certain how I'm going to set it up. And I do a few things that I'm going to show in this and tricks, but in later videos, you'll see me actually correct it a little bit. Like, one thing that you can do, let's see, I'm just going to drop another bed down, or another 2 beds. So, okay. I'm dropping a couple beds to keep myself from missing out on a few things, because I want to have to destroy a couple to open up some construction space. But what you want to do with your base is on the ground floor. I don't want to completely drown out all the ore down there, because if you lay a foundation down, the ore just won't respawn. Anything that's directly underneath the foundation won't regrow. But if I can do an outside perimeter, then basically do a cross across the middle in more or less both directions, what happens is you can pretty much build infinitely vertically at that point. As long as there is a foundation down below it that is actually connected to the structure that you're building on, it kind of counts that. And you can actually go a decent ways away from your line of your foundation. So it's kind of like if you can actually build a cross around, you can end out making a very well-connected base. So what I'm doing right here, if you build one step up, you can then kind of go step up on top of that stair. And this is actually a bit of a mistake that I've made right here. This is something I have to go back in and fix later. That gets to be a little bit tricky, because when you start running these things down into the rocks, they don't really want to connect or delete properly. But you can build a stairwell, get on top of the stairwell, and then actually build the stairwell down into the ground. That way it completely connects down. What the usefulness for that is, say a situation like this where I have a big section in the middle that's actually sunk down from the section on the outside. When you build those stairwells that actually go down underneath the ground, your pals will still use them to actually go up to those upper levels. So you can construct things that they can actually go up and work on those upper levels, and you don't have to worry about them getting stuck trying to go up. And you usually want to pair steps that you actually intend for the pals to use, like so 2 sets of steps side by side. That way it's a wide enough area to accommodate some of the bigger pals. Now they've standardized a lot of pal sizes in recent updates and made it to where even some of the bigger ones can actually pretty easily pass through some of the smaller areas. Like, you used to not really be able to ride Jet Dragon through dungeons and whatnot, but it's really not that big of an issue now. But it's still better safe than sorry. Like, you're talking about pathing issues that aren't 100% tied to size anymore, but it's still not a bad idea to do 2 tile wide stairwells just to make sure that your pals have the space to actually go up. And I've not found there being an issue with having to create upper openings, but still, if you have the space, sometimes clearing out an extra row of tiles back from a stairwell coming up from a lower level is not a bad idea. Alright, so let's skip ahead just a little bit. Just so you can see the issue that I was talking about running into. It's sort of mismatched foundations. Now, technically these line up. They're connected, but I don't really like the way it's looking. So I was trying to go back at this point and actually level everything out to the lower part. And spoiler, turns out much later on, I really should have stuck with the higher ones and just dealt with the foundation sticking up out of the ground. It's much less problems with that than with what I'm doing right now. Sticking these things in the ground like that ends out being a timely mistake, because getting them deleted out later, some of them, it turns out to be basically impossible. So, at the end of the day, what does our structure end out looking like? Well, we end out with a ring around the perimeter, and we have a decent little base so far. Now, like I said, this is going to be somewhat modified in the future, but this is starting to give the basic layout of what the actual overall base up here is going to look like. I haven't even put in the gates yet. The house is somewhat under construction. I've not fully put a roof in across the whole thing. And I know the pals really don't care about that. They don't, it doesn't help with their sanity or anything along those lines. This is just one of those things that I do for my own satisfaction. Like, once I unlock the ability to do stone foundations, I'll go through and switch everything to stone. That way the flame pals don't accidentally catch the whole thing on fire, which realistically is not that big a deal as long as you have some water pals around, because they'll put out the fires that the flame pals start. But it can still be a little bit of a pain in the rear. Now, what I'm doing right here doesn't actually click in my mind immediately that it means I didn't actually build my house out as far as I could. So eventually I'll go back and actually expand the whole lower layer to match up with where this upper layer is starting to stick out. But we start building on the second floor up here. Now, my house, I purely set it up in the long run as a sort of pal sleeping area. Usually I end up setting up my chest and storage elsewhere, and I also like to throw in windows and do them on sort of alternating tiles. So one upper, one lower, one upper, one lower. From the outside, I don't realize this yet, but that stairwell doesn't look very good. So we'll probably tweak the stairwell placement later. But for now, this looks fine. And this alternating of holes, one of the reasons why I do it is during the daytime, it ensures the inside has decent lighting without having to actually put lights everywhere. And the wall torches are okay, but they really don't look that great until you get a little bit further into the game and actually get some of the electric lights available. All right, so one of the last little bits of progress that we actually make in this episode is decide to go ahead and make the parachute. And this actually completes our basic gearing goals for this particular section. We've got our base built. We've got our parachute going. We caught just a couple more pals, but the next episode, we're actually going to go out and do some catching. Try to fill out our pal list a little bit, because it's pretty well lacking at this point. We've caught lamball, several of them. And other than that, we haven't really grabbed anything else that's on our to-do list just yet. So at this point, we're still pretty open in terms of what we need to do. However, we have actually opened up quite a few things in terms of the tech tree and in terms of items that we really need to add into the base to increase farming efficiency. So we've built up our base. We're really well prepped. Next time, we're going to start farming up some pals. So we'll pick up the pace a little bit in the next episode, or I'll just edit some things down. Either way, tried to give you a little bit of base building tips here and just talk a little bit about this and future plans. So remember everyone, if I can beat it, so can you, and have a good night.